I'm honored to introduce you this afternoon to this year's Global Learning Conference keynote speaker, Dr. Toni Kirkwood-Tucker. Before I get to some of the details of her illustrious and productive career in global education, I'd like to share a personal story of how I met Toni that will give you a little illustration of who she is as an educator and the kind of impact she's had on others and on the field of global education. So I started at FIU in 2002 as an assistant professor of social studies education. Having spent many years as an educator in the K through 12 world, when I got to the position at FIU, I had very few publications under my belt. And if you know anything about the tenure track field in education, you know that it's publish or perish. Toni also had a professional life as an educator before she got her doctorate, also in social studies education at FIU. But in 2002, Toni was long gone from FIU, busy building her own career as an academic. In spite of having her own work and no visible or no reason really to help me, a new faculty member at FIU, she contacted me to ask if I would like to write an article in the Florida Council for Social Studies Journal on how to use a global perspective in teaching and learning. Of course, I took her up on her offer, wrote the article, and was ecstatic when I sent it to her and got her reply that it was quote-unquote beautiful. She actually used that word in an academic correspondence with me, beautiful. Who was this person with all these names? Toni Kirkwood-Tucker, who sought me out, allowed me to write an article for publication and use that word beautiful in describing it. Over the years, I've come to know some of the many layers, some of them, of Toni, and I and so many others in this room and around the world can attest that they all epitomize beauty. Toni Kirkwood-Tucker is an emerita associate professor at Florida Atlantic University and retired associate professor in the School of Teacher Education at Florida State University. Her numerous publications and her 2009 edited book, Visions in Global Education, address the history, philosophy, and practice of global education. In the 1980s, during the first global education heydays in the United States, Toni directed the global education program of the Miami-Dade public schools in collaboration with our own global awareness program. She was the principal teacher trainer in over 200 schools that globalized their curriculum. During that time, she also started the annual high school Model UN program, which, as you see from the gentleman here today, is still in operation in collaboration with FIU's Political Science Department. In the 90s, as part of the FIU's Global Awareness Program, Toni was among the first global educators to participate in the Russian education reform movement that replaced Soviet-based curricula with a world-minded orientation. Thousands of leaders in teacher education programs at universities and in classrooms across Russia were trained how to teach from a global perspective. After an emotional appeal to the United States from the Russian Minister of Education, Toni coordinated the Miami-Moscow Hunger Project to send flour, vitamins, and medicine to Russia school children in rural boarding schools. And I think I'll leave it at that, and I'd like you all to give a warm welcome to Toni Kirkwood-Tucker.
I visited China on a Fulbright in 1985. Our group stayed in the dormitories of Beijing Normal University. Settling down for the night on a straw-filled bed and a rice-filled pillow, suddenly Beautiful voices entered our sparse dormitory. Doors flung open, and following the sound, Chinese students and American Fulbrighters hurried down the stairs, flocking around the only TV in the building. CNN was broadcasting. And some of you were not even born at that time.
There comes a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, when it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. We can't go on pretending day by day that someone somewhere will soon make a change. We all a part of God's great big family, and the truth, you know, love is all we need.
We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make it brighter than day. So let's start giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, we make a better day, just you and me.
What a momentous time in the history of the world. Some of the West's best musicians had gathered pro bono to appeal to the world to feed hungry African children, dying of malnutrition and preventable diseases. Tell me, have the conditions of our world improved since then? Have the prejudices ceased that hungry people are hungry because they are lazy? Good afternoon. I know some of you were not born yet when the African appeal took place, but exciting things happened already then before your birth. It is my privilege today to address distinguished members of the faculty and administrators, students, and members of the community. I'm an alumna of FIU, and I see with pride how the university has expanded, increased its student population, added new colleges, shaped the campus into an architectural beauty, and hired renowned faculty to compete with the finest public universities in the country. Your decision to infuse a global perspective into curriculum and instruction in each of your colleges, ranging from education to business to anthropology to architecture to the social sciences to engineering, physics and math and criminal justice and chemistry, health, art and literature and more, is a remarkable feat. You have established a successful national prototype in the infusion of global teaching and learning in your disciplines in higher education. Congratulations to President Mark Rosenberg, Provost Doug Watsock, and Director of the Global Initiative, Hilary Landdorf, for your exemplary vision. Your continued role in this global initiative is critical. Dewey says it best: the teacher is the most important figure insofar as the curriculum is concerned, and there is simply no point in attempting to reform any curriculum without the active participation of the teacher. Today, I am addressing the criticality of intentional dialogue, the dialogue that opens or closes doors for discussion, negotiation, and compromise between parties for a defined and definitive outcome. As all of us dwell in a nation of immigrants, many of us are first or second generation immigrants ourselves. One of our vexing issues in education is how to be inclusive of all of us in a way that is meaningful for all of us. Your mission at university is an awesome undertaking. You are to produce graduates who possess the attitudes, knowledge, and skills to succeed in the 21st century, who will secure a rewarding career, be able to live in a world free from poverty and war, and actively participating in the improvement of the human condition. The earlier panel just now demonstrated those very things I'm literally talking about today, and I want to congratulate you. You are truly on your way to be cosmopolitan citizens of the world, and you will make a difference. My presentation today speaks to research on the worldviews of United Statesians. Who is the other among us? Findings and recommendations from the Association of International Education Administrators, the Hanway conceptual model, applying these frameworks to the classroom, FIU's historical foundation, Russia's global education reform movement, very briefly, the Miami-Moscow Hunger Project that Hillary already referred to, and my recommendations and lived experiences. An alarming study by the Pew Research Center found that the United States, among all wealthy nations, has the highest proportion of citizens who believe our culture is superior to others. In their 2009 survey, 3/4 of Americans maintained that domestic concerns should take precedence over foreign matters. Even more tragic is the fact, and again it was referred to by one of our young men here, that the US educational system supports national superiority in the curriculum. So, it is not surprising to the intelligent mind that xenophobia is plaguing our nation and our institutions. And not only in the United States, my own country, Germany, with a generous Verfassung, or constitution, that welcomes immigration, is presently permeated with angst about foreigners flooding its gates, attracted to its social safety net. The need for global education is a critical factor in the education of our youth if we are to promote greater acceptance of diversity, reduce stereotyping and prejudicial assumptions about the other, eliminate xenophobia, and do not marginalize the other. So, who is the other among us? The other comprises those individuals who are in the minority, the marginalized, the immigrant, the mentally ill, the homeless, those people who wear those rag on their heads, the LGTB community, the oppressed, the descendants of slavery. Multiculturalist Pang noted that critical education moves to eliminate the marginalization of many underrepresented communities, such as the indigenous, people of color, and women. Acceptance of the other is one critical aspect in global education that must be repeatedly stressed by the teacher, as the others are many of the very students who study on our campuses, the very students who are in your classrooms, who with determination, perseverance, and sacrifice studied diligently to achieve a college degree. In my previous work in the global education reform movement in the Miami schools, the suicide of a Haitian student in one of our urban schools rocked the community. Frank de Verona, who's sitting in our midst, was the principal at that time at that high school. Being bullied and degraded about his origin, Etienne had tried unsuccessfully to hide his origin to fit into the dominant African-American high school. It did not work. We teachers must do everything we can do for our students to accept differences and honor their voices. Of great interest to you might be the findings presented at the 2014 Conference of the Association of International Education Administrators in how to effectively integrate international students on American campuses to maximize the potential for global learning. I suggest that these findings apply just as much on minority-majority campuses as on campuses in which there is a predominance and on campuses in which there is a predominance of diversity. The executive director of the AIEA, an expert on intercultural competence, Deerdorf, stated, "It's not enough to say, look, we have X number of international students on campus. What difference does it make? We must ask, how better can we utilize those resources, as well as our international faculty and scholars, and thinking broadly the international backgrounds of staff on our campuses. The question of integrating international and domestic students is an ongoing issue that you are fully aware of, and that has been for many, many years. And unfortunately, I have not found any institution yet that has found the answer, stated Deerdorf. However, I have a sense that FIU will change that. Here at FIU, our minority students, particularly students of color, often feel alienated in the Hispanic mainstream culture. FIU, like other universities, needs to do much more to bring domestic and international students together in an intentional way, as interactions occurring naturally between the foreign and the domestic students are not sufficient in itself. Researchers at this conference also found positive results. Krista Jenkins, Director of International Programs at Farley Dickinson University, who surveyed college students first as freshmen and then again as sophomores, found that the mere presence of international students does affect domestic students' attitudes with high levels of xenophobia. Good news, as they became less xenophobic if they had social contact with foreign-born students. She also found that freshman and sophomore students on campuses with a higher density of international students were more likely to experience a decreased globalization anxiety, a new term in the language. Deerdorf, however, warned that it's not sufficient to simply bring people together, even in our own classrooms, and that a one-time faculty training on intercultural competence does not work. Deerdorf suggested that universities offer faculty numerous symposia with invited outside keynote speakers who are international and working groups, the pairing of international and domestic students through conversation partners and buddy programs, but importantly, intercultural programs designed to bring diverse students together are only effective when certain conditions are met, such as the existence of a common goal for some greater purpose, when students directly interact, such as research, service learning, which was brought up today, sports teams, and the formation of collaborative groups. Deardorff, however, warned that it is if you, as faculty, no, Deardorff is convinced that it is you, the faculty, you, the teachers, who play the key role in creating a context for effective intercultural experiences. So we need to be very intentional about how we create that environment for intercultural integration. A study in the Journal of International and Intercultural Communication in 2012 found, and listen to this number, that nearly 40% of international students in the United States report having no close American friends. And they have been here an entire program of study, 4 years, or even as graduate students. 40% who leave the country go back to their own country without having developed a close American friend. I admit to my own feelings when attempting to create cross-cultural dialogue between Asian and African American graduate students at FSU. Here are some suggestions for pedagogy that can assist you in the process of promoting intercultural communication, cross-cultural understanding, and respect for the other, which are the key components for minority-majority student integration and intercultural competence. In your teaching, you wonderful teachers, you may consider applying the handy conceptual framework in how to teach from a global perspective. This classic and oldest framework is the most frequently used framework by teachers in the United States. An anthropologist by training, Hanley has the distinction of being among the first US global educators in the 60s and 70s to propose a pedagogy applicable in the classroom. The framework consists of these 5 dimensions. And it is very important for you to know, as you are already burdened with content and other responsibilities in your classroom, that you can choose 1 or 2 or maybe all 5 dimensions as you see fit in your discipline. Since, ladies and gentlemen, you are the sole decision maker in your classroom, in fact, you are the intellectual shepherd in the vast fields of the universe, in the attempt to bring your diverse sheep together as a whole. Okay, state of the planet awareness. Who would like to read that slide? Volunteer. Yes, young man. Thank you. In short, students should learn about the latest events and developments occurring in the world today, as well as their causes and effects, such as, and again it was mentioned today, the recent events in the Ukraine, where anti-government demonstrations literally led a deposition of its own president, leading to the resultant Russian annexation of the Crimea. Other examples might be the ongoing civil war in Syria, the tens of thousands of refugees flooding into neighboring nations, the ramifications of interrupted schooling for the tens of thousands of our children in the Middle East, or moving to another continent, Brazil's anxiety in preparation for the World Cup and the Olympic Games, the Summer Olympics, and its concomitant problems of infrastructure needs and removal of the favelas to the outskirts of the city, etc. Also, international students could report on the happenings in their own country, which can lead to their pride and a greater awareness among domestic students that may change their attitude towards international students. This pedagogy is consistent with Theodore's suggestion that students work in groups to discuss common goals of some greater purpose. And professors in geography in particular, is there any professor of geography here? No? They have a particular responsibility in emphasizing geographic concepts that Americans have been found to lack in comparison to our international students. We can learn from them. The second dimension is perspective consciousness. And who would like to read that? Please.
It is the recognition on the part of the individual that he or she has a view of the world that is not universally shared, that this view of the world has been and continues to be shaped by influences that often escape conscious detection, and that others have different views of the world that we must respect.
Again, multiple perspectives was brought up today at the panel discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, you can discuss that in any field of study in order to take an international view in your particular field. What textual, audiovisual, and technological materials can we use in the classroom to demonstrate that individuals, groups, and nations have different belief systems on issues that we must respect, that their voices are honored? You can use primary resource documents such as slave diaries, role play for understanding viewpoints and multiple perspectives, humor, political cartoons can be very helpful in this respect. Case studies that put a human face on issues with open-ended questions to promote discussion. The use of art, incorporating the arts from each of the respective groups, can be eye-opening, as each image has a story to tell. This perspective consciousness or worldview, for example, of Ukrainians and that of the Russians regarding the Crimea, consists of two diametrically opposed perspectives. Both parties believe that they are right. Should these diverse beliefs not be deeply examined before we are jumping to conclusions and recommendations from the West? Research clearly shows that open-mindedness toward the other is associated with less chauvinistic bias and results in greater empathy for other cultures. However, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to acknowledge that discussing differences in worldviews is complex, and teachers are cautioned as to the difficulties encountered in the struggle for cross-cultural knowing. There's one professor at the University of Michigan, Elizabeth Heilman, who discusses this topic in more detail. Elizabeth Heilman, University of Michigan. Our third dimension of HANVI is called cross-cultural awareness. And who would like to read that? Krista, how about you?
Oh my God. An awareness of the diversity of ideas and practices to to be found in human societies around the world. An understanding of how such ideas and practices compare, and a sense of how the ideas and ways of one's own society might be viewed from other vantage points, leading to the empathy and transpection of others.
Of the other, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, thank you, and it's coming. Thank you, and you need to ask me questions, and there will be time for our question. Dierdorf proposed that students interact collectively to discuss common goals, remember, of some greater purpose. So you can choose a common goal of significance related to your own discipline that you wish to empathize, such as, and these are just some examples of thousands, the immigrant experience, business practices in industrialized and non-industrialized nations, civil rights challenges, family values, climate change, common humanity, Nobel Prize winners in different disciplines, courtship norms and marriage laws, fascinating, international design in architecture, child trafficking, child soldiers, human rights violations, healthcare was also brought up today. Infant mortality rate was brought up today. For example, in Florida, would you believe the average white infant mortality rate from 2007 to 2009 was 5.2% per 1,000 live births. The African American infant mortality rate per 1,000 live births was 13. What great discussion should ensue from such findings? You might ask your students in this context, what are the live births in Cuba, in Haiti, in Mexico, in Japan, Zimbabwe, Kyrgyzstan? You can identify a local issue and compare its similarities and differences in the different cultures of the students that are represented in your class. Such discussion promotes cross-cultural understanding, leading to empathy and transpection. And here's the answer, sir. Empathy evokes the deep sadness for the suffering of the other. Transpection comprises the highest level of empathy, when the individual literally can feel and think like the other. And that does not occur very often unless maybe our Peace Corps volunteers, our people who study and live abroad for many years, mingle with the local community, that they actually feel and think like the other. Ladies and gentlemen, culturally responsive teaching is critical. My own empirical study of a large K-12 sample of students in Miami schools revealed that when students deepened their understanding and knowledge of the other, they demonstrated greater acceptance of their diverse peers in the classroom and reduced stereotyping and prejudicial assumptions about the other. These findings are undergirded by Merrifield, one of the leading globalists today, found that the global education fosters students' compassion for others in the larger world, emotions that pave the way to wanting to understand and help the other who experiences pain just like you and I. My 10-year work in the Miami schools brings the following cross-cultural misunderstanding incident to mind. One of our two globally trained teachers received a student from Ethiopia in her class. Oops, this is off. No, it's not off? No, sorry. The students and the whole school was excited until lunchtime. When the children brought their lunch trays to the table, the Ethiopian student asked permission to go to the bathroom. The students were halfway through eating when she finally reappeared. the teacher scolded her in front of her peers, telling the newcomer that she is now in America and she needs to follow American rules. What were you doing so long in the classroom? In the restroom, bathroom. With a sea of tears rolling down her cheeks, Ethiopia sat down and began to eat with her hands. The classmates and the teacher gasped, rolling their eyes and starting to laugh. Did the teacher not know that there is an elaborate cultural cleansing ritual of hands preceding eating? And that many cultures in the world use one's God-given hands to eat? What does a teacher have to do to avoid such cultural embarrassment? Miami being one of the most diverse cities in the world, let's ensure that such tragedies do not reoccur. The fourth dimension of our Hanby model is the knowledge for global teaching and learning, called Knowledge of Global Dynamics. And who would like to read that? Thank you, Kathy.
Knowledge of global dynamics is defined as a modest comprehension of key trends and mechanisms in the world systems, with emphasis on theories and concepts that may increase intelligent consciousness of global change and as awareness of unanticipated consequences emanating from events.
Thank you, Kathy. In essence, this dimension speaks to the world's increasing globalization and its interconnectedness to the world's nations and people, suggesting that students should possess some modest comprehension of world systems. So, can you, in your discipline, demonstrate to your students the interconnectedness of the human family that leads to a sense of global belonging with all humanity? Can you illustrate how the world is interconnected historically, geographically, economically, culturally, technologically, and academically, how we share our ideas, fortunately, and lead our students to move from national independence thinking to international interdependence thinking in your particular discipline? Can you demonstrate to your students the linkages or interconnectedness between, for example, the origin of math or the origin of writing in the Middle East, which leads to respect for the other in your classroom and pride by the other? Oh, how sweet of you. Thank you, thank you. Can you masterly illustrate that effective communication among nations can prevent, hopefully, conflict leading to war? That would be the ultimate goal of global education. Probably not attainable, but surely we can work towards that goal. Hanby also warned in this particular dimension of unanticipated consequences of an event. A classic example in interconnectedness is the Nestle baby formula catastrophe. Has anyone heard of that? Oh, Kathy, wonderful. Okay. Well, ages you and me. Where women in non-industrialized nations were told to use instant formulas for their newborns, so they could be freed from breastfeeding and have the opportunity to work. Nestle, however, failed to think of the contaminated water used to mix the formula, resulting in horrific physical and mental impairment of thousands of babies in non-industrialized nations. You may ask in your class, were the Nestle executives aware of that? A question in a business class, for example, that would surely lead to heated discussions of business ethics. Finally, the last slide, Handley's fifth and final dimension of awareness of human choices. And who wishes to read that? Thank you, Eric.
Awareness of human choices addresses the problems of choice confronting individuals, the problems of choices confronting individuals, nations, and the human species as consciousness and knowledge of global systems expand.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Eric, as you can see, is my right hand.
I think on the left.
Oh, in this case, my left hand. This dimension probes the choices made by individuals and groups and nations on the local, national, and international levels. Students are placed in problem-solving decision mode to examine the context within which decisions are made. They are asked to hypothesize alternative solutions, like in the case of Mr. Putin, decision in the annexation of the Crimea. The teacher may ask, what other choices did Mr. Putin have? What historical, geopolitical reasons did he have to make that decision? Or are our own actions important enough to bring about change? I now will move on. I have to make this shorter, so please forgive me, but I hope I made myself clear about the importance of human choices in anything we do, daily, with our students, when we sit at executive board meetings, etc., moving up all the way to the level of the United Nations, ambassadors to the world, etc. How do we apply the Handley model to the classroom, you might ask? Aren't you already burdened enough in what you have to do? Isn't your content already big enough that you don't need to do anything in addition? Well, you might ask, where just specifically in the curriculum would it be most effective that I ask a question about multiple consciousness or cross-cultural understanding? Should it be spontaneous, just as it comes across our desk, or in every Wednesday class? In one of our high schools, in fact, in Frank's class, every Wednesday we did global education, only every Wednesday. The attendance went up in that high school. But only you can make that decision when it is most appropriate in your discipline. In average size classes, surely you can include one or more dimensions in teacher-led discussions, or in collaborative groups divided equally among majority and minority students. In your big classes, using a team-based learning groups of 7 or more, with international and domestic students equally representing the group. Please note, and we have been reminded earlier by Stephen Thornton, University of South Florida, that the teacher are the ultimate curricular and pedagogical gatekeeper for what is taking place in the classroom. I now would like to move on to FIU's historical foundation in global education. Your groundbreaking work at FIU in global teaching and learning is undergirded by FIU's history of global education in its teacher education program and in Miami's and Russia's public institutions. Did you know that FIU's Chan Tucker, Professor of Social Science Education and Director of the Global Awareness Program of the College of Education, collaborated with the Miami Public Schools with a $1.3 million grant? That between 1984 and 1994, we globalized 2/3 of Miami's schools. That we trained approximately 1,000 teachers, media specialists and administrators, and reached over 100,000 students. That we implement the global programs within the feeder pattern configuration, incrementally in three-year programs to reach almost 200 schools in the county. We used globally trained teacher trainers and school-based leadership teams, again trained in global education, who were selected by the school site principal, and to train teachers who came new into the program in their school or at FIU workshops and conferences and seminars, just like you have here today. I was the principal global teacher pedagogue at that time and later directed the International Global Education Program in the district office. That we were also fortunate at that time to have a visiting scholar from Harare, University of Harare, who brought his knowledge about African history and culture to our teachers. We shared his vast knowledge at university workshops and ensured that teachers and students in their lifetime will never refer to the world's second continent as a country. Please pay attention when anyone does that. The global programs in Miami schools were highly successful, creating a national prototype emulated in other school systems in the country. Our work in the Miami schools, however, also in connection with FIU, led to the invitation by the Russian Ministry of Education to collaborate in its radical education reform movement after the fall of the wall. Preceding this invitation, a high-level Russian delegation had come to Miami in 1999 at the invitation of Jan Tucker and brought together administrators of the Miami schools under the leadership of Frank de Verona, who is in our audience, who then had achieved the rank of Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction in the country's fourth largest school district, as well as leading FIU professors, including their president at the time, President Madik. Okay. This slide shows President Madik with the 4 visiting Russian deputy ministers at FIU. Representing from the left, obviously, Mr. Madik, then the Minister of Psychological Services, the Minister of Study of Nationalities Education. Nationalities is equal in our country to minority. They're called their minority groups, and they have over 100 large nationalities. They call them nationalities. Then the tall gentleman, Viktor, is in charge of teacher education, and Lena Lenskaya, she was in charge of international cooperation. And the next slide shows the Russian Minister of Education, Dr. Edward Dmitrievich Neprov, greeting school board member Janet Merkelili, and President Madik greeting Mrs. Neprov, the wife of the Russian Minister of Education. Accepting the Russian invitation, Jan and I, Tucker, attended the first Russian international conference in many, many years, I guess since before the Russian Revolution in 1917. And that particular conference was held in Sochi in 1991. Sochi, yeah? Yeah, with its subtropical weather and recent site, of course, of the Winter Olympic Games. And this slide shows the Minister of Education of Russia, Dr. Neprov, appointed by President Yeltsin, who had this to say at the opening of the Sochi conference. It is education that is to destroy old-fashioned stereotypes and will change the psyche of a nation. It is education as well that is to lead the way in developing people's democratic world outlook, their acquiring new political culture, and their economic awareness. I will now briefly explain our role in the Russian education reform movement. Incidentally, the statue is in Volgograd, the former Stalingrad, and she is powerful. Yeah. Our work in Russia from 1991 to 1998 resulted in the integration of global programs across disciplines at 10 Russian universities and the allied comprehensive public schools. That included the training of professors in all disciplines, like here at FIU, and the training of principals and teachers in global education and pedagogy. Establishment of 10 global communication centers across Russia, the exchange of translated materials and newsletters, and the creation of a student exchange program, and much more. After Sochi, all conferences from then on were held on the beautiful campus of Ryazan State Pedagogical University, and this university is only about 150 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine the gargantuan task that lay ahead of the Russian educators? During the Soviet era, teachers were mandated to teach the same set of objectives and lectured from the same page of the same textbook on the same day, whether they were located in Leningrad or Stalingrad or Vladivostok or Moscow. All their books were useless. They imported ultimately books from the West, and generous schools and universities would send them a pack, very expensive to send. But can you imagine the dilemma of a teacher who wanted to change the curriculum at that time? And many teachers were not ready, obviously. They were trained in the Soviet philosophy of education. All right. I wanted to add that everything about the country is monumental. Its turbulent history, its cultural achievements, and its size. And one of Russia's 19th century poet, Fyodor Tyutchev, said this: Russia cannot be understood with the mind, nor can she be measured by a common yardstick. A special character she has. In Russia, one can only have faith. The next slide shows a meeting of the minds of high-level Russian and US educators. Again, FIU's president, Madik, and Mrs. Madik, who had come to that second conference in Ryazan, our Russian colleagues from the Ministry of Education, several FIU professors, where they together signed partnership documents for joint faculty research and student and faculty exchanges. This image shows American students from Turner Technical Arts High School, where I ended up teaching here in Miami, with their Russian peers, the principal to your left, and the interpreter teacher in the red coat. And here is one of my exchange students, Tori from Turner Technical Arts High School in Miami, who spent his homestay with the police captain and his family in Chebuksary. Chebuksary is located in the Chuvash Republic along the Volga River. And we went there by an overnight train to stay with our Russian host families. Among the many linkages between our global schools in Miami and in Russia, I want to point out, however, one auspicious project that Dr. Landorf earlier alluded to, illustrating the local to the global between two cultures in a seamless and unanticipated way, the Miami-Moscow Hunger Project. While attending the Sochi conference in '91, it came to our attention that hunger was a permanent condition in many Russian communities. And soon after we returned from this conference, Dr. Neprov gave a televised speech on CNN calling on the United States for assistance in the hunger crisis, which had caused pervasive malnutrition of children and the elderly, particularly in rural areas. The Miami school system embraced the call with open heart, placing empty milk cartons on students' dining room tables at school. The teachers encouraged students to drink water instead of buying milk and put their milk money, a quarter at that time, into containers labeled for Russia's hungry children. We collected sufficient funds to purchase thousands of pounds of flour, vitamins, nuts, and raisins, and basic medicine, which Delta Airline cargo planes flew to Moscow free of charge. From their responses, I know, I've been there 8 times over extended periods of time, that our assistance brought new hope to these Russian children. In this beautiful Russia, I learned to love, where the glorious golden onion domes, churches, take your breath away. They do. Yes, FIU has a definitive presence in the Miami schools and in Russian institutions. My recommendations. Some recommendations for global teaching and learning and building a better world are: welcome your students in languages they represent. And mind you, you already might be doing that. I do not know this, so please forgive me if I am redundant. Learn additional innocuous words like como está, and ni hao, and comment allez-vous, and wie geht es Ihnen, and complimentary words like great and wonderful, please and gracias. In your classes, pair students from different cultures and have them formally introduce each other to the class on the first day of when you meet. I realize this is taking a lot of time away from your teaching, but you need that icebreaker that brings together the foreign with the local. Emphasize the affective domain by opening doors to group work or team-based learning, so students are compelled to communicate interculturally. In your small classes, have students ask each other teacher-prepared questions of your design, or in your large classes, use team-based learning strategies with intentionally intercultural teams. Critical is that you divide the groups. Do not let them do it among themselves. You divide the group to ensure that minority and majority students are equally represented in each group. Another recommendation I wanted to make, and not knowing that you have already a wonderful model United Nations here at FIU. Indeed, you are competing with other schools in the country. It is, like you have so well stated earlier, a wonderful and effective culminating activity at the end of the semester or the academic year. Invite Fulbright scholars into your discipline. Invite speakers who have lived abroad into your classrooms. Engage with the Miami Visitors Bureau, and continue to promote student and teacher exchanges. Engage in faculty partnerships and international scholars. Maybe you want to support or build a school in Haiti, with Haiti being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. expand your already very effective travel study programs, especially to non-industrialized nations. That is a challenge. So in closing, FIU's global initiative provides the ideal framework by which to transform global teaching and learning into global engagement, like Malala, the willingness to help others. Your global learning for global citizenship component is the optimal goal of global education as we seek to become cosmopolitan citizens who must accept the other, reduce stereotyping and false assumptions, eliminate xenophobia, and take responsibility for solving the problems of Mother Earth. And now, truly in closing, you might ask why my passion for global teaching and learning is embedded so deeply in my psyche. There are many reasons. I only mention 5. First, because I am a teacher, the noblest profession of them all. It is my strong belief that good teachers outside the family have the greatest, and significant others, I must add, have the greatest opportunity to reach our youth of today. Second, global education is humanistic, integrative, interdisciplinary, inclusive, generic, and comprises a viable strategy for democratizing education. Third, my belief about the larger world have been shaped by memorable experiences abroad during my travel study trips and my international conferences to many, many, many nations I will not state, and 2 Fulbright scholarships to China and 1 to Russia. These experiences, ladies and gentlemen, have taught me that the world is filled with kind, caring, and talented people, many of whom have been victims of corrupt governments, colonialism, and greed. Their deprivation did not prevent them from moving forward selflessly to improve the lives of others. A 4th reason for my passion for global education is my border crossing experiences when I left southern Germany for the Deep South in the United States in the early 1960s. Not only was I traumatized by shotgun houses, rocking chairs on front porches, and intolerable humidity in 100-degree weather, like New Orleans, but by the segregation of African Americans confined to the back of the bus. I was traumatized by the refusal of my mother-in-law's maid, Yvonne, to eat at the same table with me, and by her request to drop her off at the corner of the housing project when she finally consented to let me drive her home. I was traumatized by cities burning, demonstrators beaten and killed, remember the Freedom Riders? Unnerving race riots, the discovery in my first year of teaching at the height of integration in Miami schools that my bust-in black middle schoolers from nearby Liberty City had never seen the Atlantic Ocean, nor had dipped their toes in the warm water of the Atlantic. Yeah. I finally took him on that field trip. Last one. My 5th reason, and perhaps the most passionate reason for my deep belief in the criticality of global education, stems from my experiences growing up during the Nazi era. I clearly remember the scene when our village priest entered our classroom one morning. He climbed on the teacher's chair behind the desk, removed the hand-carved crucifix from the wall, and replaced it with a framed picture of Hitler. This was Catholic Bavaria. The mayor, the priest, and the teachers were the prominent individuals in our village. The priest stepped down from the chair and told the class, "From now on, when your teacher comes into the room, you will no longer pray. Instead, you stand up, salute Hitler, and shout, 'Sieg Heil,' 3 times. Second, when you greet people in the street, which you do in a small town where everybody knows you, you no longer greet them with Grüß Gott or hello, Frau Meier, but you raise your arm and you say, 'Sieg Heil, Frau Meier.' As a first grader, I thought Jesus coming down from the wall was cool. I always felt sorry for him having to hang on a cross. But more seriously, when I informed my father of this event, he grabbed me by the arms and spoke in no uncertain terms. "I forbid you to salute Hitler in the classroom and in the street. Do you understand? Do not let me catch you." From the next day on, I had to remain 1 hour longer in school every day, cleaning blackboards and floors and windows and bathrooms, until the end of that school year. When the priest came to the house to speak about my disobedience, Papa threw him out of the house, calling him einen schwarzen Lumpen, a black-frocked bandit. My family had become the other. When my little brother was born in our house in 1944, I asked my mom why Dr. Kohlmeier did not deliver him like he did me and my sister. Mama responded that she could not find him. My father, just arriving from Munich where he worked in the Messerschmitt factory, after being injured in the war, yelled at my mother, "Tell her the truth. Dr. Kohlmeier is a Jew, and he was taken away. Who knows in which concentration camp he and his family were killed?" Mama started moaning, which I still can hear, and I begged my father to tell me about the camps. He ranted for hours as he spoke to his 7-year-old firstborn daughter of the horrors of the concentration camps, especially in nearby Dachau. You can understand more fully now, I think, why I see global education not as a choice, but as a vital imperative. You can understand my passion for global education and my belief in its power over time to dispel prejudice and intolerance and illuminate the way to intercultural understanding and respect for the other. That will help all of us together build a better world. Thank you.